Now let's turn our attention to multimeters. Multimeter, for somebody that is just starting now with the Arduino, is the most important and perhaps really the only bench instrument or measurement or test instrument that you will need. It does everything you need in order to get started and start to get an understanding of how circuits work. These days, pretty much any multimeter that you get, even a $10 multimeter, will be able to do the measurements that we really need. The ability to measure voltage, current, resistance, and continuity. Continuity is the ability to detect when two parts of a circuit are electrically connected to each other, even if they are remote to each other. I'll explain what that means. Multimeters these days can do many other things as well, but as we are starting our journey with the Arduino, we're not going to worry about anything else other than these basic measurements. As I said, every multimeter these days can do these measurements without any difficulty at all, even my very old trusty $10 multimeter. But of course, there are differences between multimeters. The most important difference between cheaper and slightly more expensive multimeters is their ability to detect the range in which whatever they are measuring is, so that you don't have to guess. I'm going to demonstrate what that really means. So to do my demonstration, I will play around with a very simple circuit on a mini breadboard. What I have here is a large LED. I've connected that to a 1 kilo ohm resistor and then using flat jumper wires to the power rail of my breadboard. So one pin of my LED, the long pin, via the yellow flat jumper wire goes to the 5-volt positive rail on the breadboard. Then the short pin of my LED, it's called the cathode, via the 1 kilo ohm resistor, and the gray flat jumper wire goes to the blue rail, the blue power rail on my breadboard. And then I'm getting power from my breadboard power supply. I've set the jumper wire here so that I'm conveying 5 volts to the red rail. I've connected that through the bottle connector to my 9-volt power supply. So when I turn it on, press the button, you can see that the LED goes on. And now it's off. So I have 5 volts going onto my power rail. And let's see if we can actually measure that using my simple, very basic, cheap, and very old multimeter. Now this is very simple, which means that I need to have an expectation of the size of the voltage that I'm about to measure. And I need to tell my multimeter what that size is. So you can see on the dial on the right side, for example, I've got 200 M, which means millivolts, or 2000 millivolts. Then it goes to 20 volts, 200 volts, 500, etc. This indicates the range of the voltage that I want to measure. So if I configure my multimeter to 200 millivolts, then my multimeter will be now configured to measure a voltage from 0 to 200 millivolts. So I said I expect approximately 5-volt voltage on the power rail, so this is just too little. (2000 millivolts is also too little. What I'm expecting is a voltage between 0 and say 20 volts, and this is the available range here. So I'm going to move my dial to the 20 volts. So now my multimeter is ready to do a measurement. So the measurement that I want to do is to see what is the voltage on the power rail of the breadboard. So let's see, 2 convenient spots to get that measurement would be right here, where the gray jumper wire connects to the blue rail, and right here where the yellow jumper wire connects to the red rail. So I try to put my probes there as close as I can, and I see a 2.61 volt measurement. So it's about half of what I expected. I wonder why. So that tells me that the breadboard power supply is not working well. Let's see if I have an alternative. So I picked this one up from one of my drawers, and I'll see if this one works the way that I expect. I expect 5 volts to come out of the power supply into the rail. Okay, now let's repeat the measurement. What do we have here? So black on the blue and red on the red. So now we have a 5 volt power supply. So by doing this measurement, I learned that my first power supply is not working very well. I've got to probably throw it out. I don't think this is repairable. But I used my test instrument to test the power supply and learned that it's not working properly. So I'm going to mark it and put it aside so that I don't use it again. Now, if I used my slightly more expensive power supply to do the same measurement, all I've got to do is to tell it that I want to measure volts. I don't have to tell it what range I'm expecting that the voltage source will be supplying. So I'm going to let the multimeter figure out what the range is. So I'm going to do the connection in this exact same way as earlier, as with the first example. So black on blue and red on red. And you'll see that the 10mm multimeter went automatically to the right range and is telling me that the voltage on the power rail is 4.98 volts. Great.